What if I told you a single-aisle jet, the kind you'd normally fly for 2 hours to Barcelona, is now quietly crossing the Atlantic with 180 passengers and reshaping global aviation? Airbus built it. Boeing has no answer. Over 550 orders, 27 airlines. Even Boeing's most loyal customers are defecting. We know how it's rewriting the map of long-haul flying. What nobody at Boeing can explain is how they're supposed to catch up before 2035. This is the Airbus A321XLR, a narrowbody with a range of 4,700 nautical miles, 11 hours in the air, 180 to 220 passengers, and per-seat fuel burn that comes in 30% lower than the Boeing 757 it was built to replace. On paper, it's just another variant in the A320 family. In reality, it's the most strategically dangerous aircraft Airbus has ever launched because it doesn't just compete with Boeing. It targets a gap Boeing spent a decade promising to fill and then walked away from. And the airlines that used to be Boeing's most loyal customers, United, American, Icelandair, are now the ones signing the checks. But to understand how Airbus built a jet Boeing can't match, you have to go back to a decision Boeing made in 2011. The year is 2011. Boeing has a problem. The 757, the workhorse that opened up transatlantic routes for decades, is out of production. Airlines are screaming for a replacement, something narrow-bodied, fuel-efficient, but with the legs to cross an ocean. Boeing studies the market. They call it the middle of the market. They promise a clean-sheet design, the so-called 797, a new mid-size airplane that would dominate exactly this space. Engineers work on it for years. Airlines are told it's coming. Therefore, Boeing puts its chips into updating the 737 instead, stretching the old airframe into what becomes the 737 MAX. Then 2018 and 2019 happen. Lion Air, Ethiopian Airlines, 346 people dead. The MAX is grounded globally for 20 months. Boeing hemorrhages $20 billion. Supply chains collapse. The 797 program gets quietly euthanized. Boeing's commercial division is fighting for survival. Meanwhile, in Toulouse, Airbus engineers are staring at the same market gap Boeing just abandoned. They don't need a clean sheet. They already have the A321neo. All they need to do is make it fly further, a lot further. The question is how, and the answer they came up with broke 2 decades of narrow-body design rules. Then Airbus did something nobody expected. Instead of cramming extra fuel tanks into the cargo hold like every previous long-range narrow-body, Airbus engineers redesigned the lower fuselage itself. They molded a permanent fuel tank directly into the belly of the aircraft. They called it the rear center tank. It sits between the wings and the rear cargo hold, carrying around 12,900 liters of additional fuel without stealing passenger baggage space. Combined with aerodynamic tweaks, strengthened landing gear, and Pratt & Whitney or CFM engines, the XLR suddenly had 4,700 nautical miles of range, 11 hours in the air, in a narrow body. But here's where it almost fell apart. The European Union Aviation Safety Agency, EASA, looked at this rear center tank and raised a red flag, a permanent fuel tank pressed against the aluminum fuselage skin. If the aircraft made a belly landing or caught fire on the ground, there was concern the fuel could ignite far faster than on any conventional jet. Certification stalled. Airbus spent months redesigning the tank's lower shielding, adding fireproof liners, reinforcing the skin. The first delivery, originally planned for early 2023, slipped into late October 2024. By November, Iberia took aircraft number 1 and flew it from Madrid to Boston. That route used to require a Boeing 767. Now it was being flown by a single-aisle jet carrying 182 passengers. Wait, it gets worse for Boeing, because Iberia wasn't an outlier. She was the opening shot. The orders started arriving like a flood. American Airlines, 50 aircraft. United Airlines, 50 aircraft. Both carriers had aging Boeing 757 fleets and no Boeing replacement in sight. Aer Lingus ordered 6 and immediately announced routes like Dublin to Nashville and Dublin to Indianapolis. Mid-sized American cities that traditionally struggled to sustain year-round direct service to Europe using larger wide-body jets. Iberia connected Madrid to Washington Dulles. JetBlue lined them up for London. Even Wizz Air, a European ultra-low-cost carrier, started flying 7- and 8-hour routes from London to Jeddah and Milan to Abu Dhabi on a narrow body. But the single most devastating order came from a place nobody saw coming: Icelandair. For more than 50 years, Icelandair's entire business model depended on Boeing 757s, 767s, 737 MAXes. The airline was built around Boeing airframes connecting North America to Europe through Reykjavik. Because Boeing had no modern 757 replacement, Icelandair broke ranks. They ordered the A321XLR. It was the first Airbus narrowbody in their entire corporate history. The Boeing loyalist camp was cracking. And the reason all of this matters, the reason Boeing should have been terrified, isn't about the orders themselves. It's about what the XLR was secretly doing to the entire global airline map. But the jet itself was only half the weapon. The other half was the route revolution, because for the last 40 years, long-haul flying was built on one rule: hub and spoke. You flew from a small city to a mega hub, Heathrow, JFK, Frankfurt, Charles de Gaulle, and then transferred onto a wide-body jumbo packed with 350 seats. That model existed because no other aircraft could cross an ocean profitably. You needed to fill 400 seats to justify the trip. Therefore, hubs became kingmakers. Entire city economies depended on being a mega hub. The A321XLR detonates that entire model. With a break-even of roughly 150 passengers instead of 300, airlines can now fly direct between cities that would have been financially suicidal before. Dublin to Nashville, Madrid to Boston, Marseille to New York, Milan to Abu Dhabi. Over 50 brand new direct routes are projected to be unlocked in just its first 18 months of service alone. Secondary airports, mid-sized regional hubs, suddenly had intercontinental connections they were never supposed to have. The quiet losers, the mega hubs. London Heathrow, for years the single most important airport on Earth for transatlantic traffic, is watching passengers bypass it entirely. Therefore, Airbus didn't just sell a plane. They sold the dismantling of a business model. And Boeing, still bleeding cash from the MAX, still dealing with door plugs blowing off 737s, couldn't even respond with a press release, let alone an aircraft. Boeing knew this was coming. That's what makes this story so brutal. Internal Boeing strategy documents from 2016 and 2017 identified the middle of the market as a $30 to $40 billion opportunity. They had engineering teams, they had wind tunnel models, they had customer briefings. The 797 was supposed to be a composite-built, twin-aisle, middle-range jet that would crush exactly what the XLR is now doing. But here's the setup that Boeing walked into. The 737 MAX grounding cost them conservatively $20 billion in fines, compensation, and lost orders. The pandemic stripped another $10 billion. The Starliner space capsule failures added pressure. Then the Alaska Airlines door plug blowout in January 2024 triggered another FAA crackdown. Boeing's cash reserves couldn't support a clean sheet program. Therefore, the 797 was quietly shelved. Now Boeing faces a cornered animal's choice. Option 1. Design a clean sheet narrowbody with XLR class range. Cost estimate: $20 to $30 billion. Development time: 10 to 12 years. First delivery: optimistically 2035. By then, Airbus will have delivered over 1,000 XLRs and locked in every major replacement cycle for the next generation. Option 2. Stretch the 737 MAX further, except the MAX 10, Boeing's longest variant, maxes out at 3,100 nautical miles. That's 1,600 miles short of the XLR. It physically cannot cross the Atlantic with a full load. Option 3. Do nothing and surrender the middle of the market for an entire generation. Whichever option Boeing picks, they lose. The only question is how much. And this is where it all falls apart, because the financial markets have already started pricing in the answer. So here's where Boeing actually stands today. The A321XLR has crossed 550 firm orders, and it's still climbing. Airbus's backlog for the entire A320 family stretches past 2029. Every production slot at Toulouse, Hamburg, Mobile, and Tianjin is spoken for. Meanwhile, Boeing posted a company-wide quarterly loss of over $6 billion in late 2024, driven heavily by its bleeding commercial divisions. reason, the FAA has capped max production at 38 aircraft per month. Analysts at Jefferies, Bernstein, and Bank of America have all published notes suggesting that the middle of the market is now effectively a single supplier segment. Airbus has a de facto monopoly on transatlantic narrowbody flying for the next decade minimum. But here's the final twist, the detail most of the coverage misses. Airbus isn't stopping. Internal presentations to airline customers in 2024 hinted at a further stretched variant, unofficially called the A322, with even greater range and capacity. If that aircraft gets launched, it wouldn't just compete with a theoretical Boeing middle-of-the-market jet, it would land before Boeing could even finish designing one, which leaves Boeing with a question nobody at the company seems willing to answer publicly. If they can't match the XLR, and they can't beat what comes after it, then what exactly does a commercial Boeing look like in 2035? The company that built the 747, the 777, the 787 is now watching Airbus walk into its most profitable territory with a narrow body that shouldn't have been possible, and Boeing still hasn't announced a replacement program. The quietest aircraft in aviation might turn out to be the loudest warning shot Boeing has ever received. Whether they answer it, or whether the next decade simply belongs to Toulouse, is a decision that may already be out of their hands. Hey, before you go, the YouTube algorithm thinks you're going to like this video next, so why not check it out?